and welcome to Literary Prospects, where we talk to authors and literary professionals about books, publishing, and the writing life. I'm Kelley Vick. I'm the host of the program, and in just a moment, it will be my pleasure to introduce today's guest. But first, a reminder that if you like what you hear, please do take a moment to subscribe. It helps us out, and you can make sure you never miss an episode. Also, we've opened a Literary Prospects shop, so if you're looking for bookish shirts, totes, and gifts, please check that out at literaryprospects.etsy.com. And to grab books featured on the podcast and check out more curated book lists, you can visit the Literary Prospects bookstore on bookshop.org. And last, but certainly not least, if you're interested in extra content on querying and publishing that's only for our members, please consider joining the Literary Prospects Patreon at patreon.com/literary prospects. We'll leave all those links below in the show notes. And now, let's introduce today's guest. Ken Miller, author of the new novel High Finance, is president and CEO of Ken Miller Capital. He's the former vice chairman of Merrill Lynch Capital Markets and Credit Suisse First Boston, and has served on the board of directors for a number of corporations, as well as serving on the board of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations and PEN America. He's also an active member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Ken's articles have appeared in the Harvard Journal of Legislation, The Business Lawyer, the Far Eastern Economic Review, The New Republic, The Deal, The Nation, Fortune, Time, and others. High Finance is his first novel. Ken Miller, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your illuminating debut novel, High Finance. Author Elliot Ackerman says Ken Miller's High Finance is a brilliant read, funny and poignant, with an insider's knowledge of Wall Street. I couldn't put it down. Author Esmeralda Santiago says High Finance brings a new authoritative voice to fiction from the cutthroat world of elite investment banking. As a reader, I experienced many moments of mirth and even found myself laughing out loud at this new, inventive novel and stories. Director of Rockefeller Capital Management, David Rockefeller Jr., says this engaging novel about a flawed financier is written by a gifted storyteller who knows the ins and outs of high finance. So, with that, welcome, Ken. And what can you tell us about high finance? How do you describe the book?
Well, thank you for asking, and it's great to be with you, Kelley. I myself came to Wall Street in '76, a year before the hero of this, or the anti-hero of this novel came. Jed Chinkoska is from the south side of Chicago, as am I, and there are other similarities, but he's a truly unappealing character, and I hope there are many, many differences. If you're friends with a novelist, be careful because they may borrow traits from you. And I borrowed traits from a number of folks I ran into. I came to Wall Street late because I'd been in the civil rights movement and didn't get there until '76. So many of the partners were my age. But anyway, book. So the book features a highly unlikable character, although there are at least two characters who are even more unlikable and despicable. One is a client who in a chapter called High Finance, and another is an internal auditor who's trying to bust the protagonist for trading on inside information, which he most likely is. And he binges on pot when it's illegal and stolichnaya. He cheats on his wife. And one of the things that the reader knows almost from the beginning is that this is a man who cannot get enough shares of Lehman Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's generally understood in finance that you should diversify your portfolio, but even smart people have blind spots, and this is Jed's. And so he's always buying more Lehman shares. If it goes down, he thinks it's a chance to average down. He uses every trick in the book to get people to sell him shares. And finally, he borrows $100 million to buy his last tranche. And if you look at the cover of the book, Kelly, you see the actual chart of Lehman's shares as it goes up and goes down. And in the third chapter from the end, which is called The Fall, he realizes he's ruined and he
Hmm.
has to move from his 7-bedroom duplex on Park Avenue to a cheap rental in Patchogue. And only in the penultimate chapter do you hear from the long suffering wife and get a view of who she is. And then finally, in the last chapter called The Cope, you see how this former Wall Street great was brought so low and how he deals with it.
What was the spark that got this one started for you, that got you working on this novel in
Well,
stories, essentially?
yeah, it's a novel in stories. I guess I have a friend who says that if I see a photograph, I know I'm supposed to write a short story. But if I see a movie, I'm supposed to write a novel.
Mhm.
The first time I took pen to paper or finger to keys on this was, I think, a piece I wrote. I think I evoked the character in the chapter called "Let's Face It," and then I decided I wanted to write a novel about Wall Street, and it went from there. And so all the other stories are highly connected
Mhm.
to the protagonist. But you never know when the spark is going to come or where it's going to come from. I actually have another novel in the can that I was dying to bring forth, but I was advised to do this one first. So hopefully next year there will be
Oh,
another
that's
one.
great. Another one already, ready to go.
Yep. And I'm working on a third, which is, I was actually just working on it a little bit before we spoke.
How long do we think we have to wait for the third one?
Well, I hope to
Already
have it
jumping
finished.
ahead.
I hope to have it finished by the end of the year and maybe sometime in 27. I don't know. Depends on this and that.
Excellent. Well, getting back to the novel at hand at the moment, High Finance, um, we talked about how it's a novel in stories, 11 chapters, and each one is written from a different point of view of someone who is somehow involved with Jed, our main character. How did you decide on this structure? And now that I'm asking this question, I'm wondering if there are extra stories out there that were not included.
There is actually an extra story called, I forget what it's called, but it's about a world-class chef. And I would have had him cooking in the Lehman dining room because, the Wall Street firms prided themselves on their chefs. They would import them
Mhm.
from France and Italy, and then they'd brag to the clients about Monsieur Le Fournier. He comes to us from Paris, blah blah blah. Honestly, I am not a particular student of the creative process. I experience it, and when a character speaks to me, I just take dictation.
Hmm.
So I don't know exactly the answer to your question.
What was your process like when you were working? What is it? Do you have a particular time of day that you sit, or are you just struck with inspiration and you hear the voice of the character in your head? What does it look like for you?
I've got a line over my workplace that says in Latin, "No day without a line." It was given to me by Ursula Heggie, who was teaching a writer's workshop I attended. And it's such a nice low bar. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you can write one line a day, you get to call yourself a writer, according to Ursula Heggie. And it made it great for me because usually I get to my desk by 8 in the morning. If I don't have business stuff to do, because I'm still doing early stage venture capital investing,
Mm-hmm.
I can turn to creative writing right away. And if I get a solid 2 hours with a good cup of espresso, maybe even lighting a little incense for good luck. I
Mhm.
can sit there, and then depends on the day, but in the interstices of the day, I might go back to something that I felt I'd left hanging, and I can leave notes to myself in the margin. The trick, I don't know if it was Hemingway, but it was someone, I think it was Hemingway, who said the trick is to leave yourself a good place to start. So you look forward to
Mhm.
sitting down. But honestly, it doesn't always work that way. As you know, you hit these long writer's block periods where you just want to kill yourself. But sometimes you go through periods where it flows and you feel good, and it informs the mood of the whole day.
How do you get through those writer? Do you have any ways that you personally get through those periods of writer's block when it feels like it's just not flowing?
Uh, I talk to people about it. I'm not very
Mm.
secretive about my writing. Like if you were to say, "Can I see the, uh, beginning of the novel you're working on?" I probably wouldn't have any problem showing it to you. So I may show it to a friend or two, but I don't ask them where to go.
Mhm.
These days, I have to say, AI is playing a bigger role in my writing than it did before, because this novel I'm working on has to do with sex with robots. And it's set in 2037,
Mhm.
initially in Puerto Rico. And I, um, I need help on some of the technology of the future. And it's like having three MIT scientists sitting, at my side, ready to answer any question I have. But even before that, I was using it as a kind of thesaurus on steroids, where you might put a phrase in and say, this is too dark, or it's not funny enough, or whatever. And the program might give me three choices, of which I would use none, but they would be prompt that
Mm.
could help me find my way to a better way of expression.
I love that idea of using AI not for the writing, which can be, a problem these days for a lot of authors, but using it as a prompt, a way to conduct research, or just a way to get going as a tool, right?
Well, you prompt it and then it prompts you back. It's kind of a
Yeah,
conversation in a way.
I like that. I like the conversation aspect of it. We've talked about, you mentioned, well, we haven't talked about it, and I'd like to get into it a little bit more. You mentioned that the characters, maybe Jed, our anti-hero, if you will, is an amalgamation of a lot of characters that you met on Wall Street. Are there any characters in the book that are really more particularly based on one person or another? Is everyone kind of an amalgamation? Anybody going to
Well,
recognize
it's
themselves
a
here?
good it's a very good question, an astute question, but I'm a kind of afraid to answer it because I there are libel laws. But I would say in general they're amalgams. Uh, the client represents one client I had who it's more like than others.
Oh, that's
Some of the
terrifying.
chapters are in the third person from the point of view of the omniscient author, but there's his British secretary. I had a British secretary. I would say this, I don't even remember many of her traits, and this has little to do with her. So it's
Mhm.
riffing on a person I knew. I've known internal auditors before, and there's a chapter called Internal Audit. Um, the Marxist brother of the main protagonist is probably more like me. I'm very left in my politics,
Mhm.
but and Amanda, the wife, I would hope it has as little to do with my wife as Jed Shinkoska does with me. But again, there's aspects. So
The story does, there are a couple of things I want to get back to that. Actually, before we go on, I did want to, you mentioned that some of the stories are in a third person point of view, sort of a close third person, and there are a few that are in first person point of view. We've got Jed on
Right.
the day of Lehman's fall. I believe the client was a first person, and our auditor as well. Was it
Uh,
Bobby the auditor?
it's weird. It's weird. When you write a novel, you have to read it so many times. You begin to think you could do it in your sleep. But I'm trying to remember if internal audit, yeah, I think it is the first person. It's this character, Bobby Cherubini,
Mm-hmm.
who is the spin-off for my second novel. Uh, he is sent to a high security men's prison for himself uh, engaging in illegal activity.
Interesting.
Um, so let's see, what was I trying to explain to you by saying, oh yeah, so yeah, first person in his case, uh, and he'll be back.
What drew you to going with first person in the chapters where you decided to go in the first person voice versus third person in the others?
Well, I probably, uh, again, I don't know. I would say the second chapter I had originally written in the uh, first person,
Hmm.
and the editor at Ulysses, my publisher, wanted me to change it and write it in the third person. And I that was a little harder than I thought, but it was mainly mechanical. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have to change the story very much.
Mm-hmm.
In general, uh, I decide what topic I want to address or what aspect of Jed's personality I want to address, and then see who says what. Um, and somebody starts talking to me about it, and as I say, I write it down. And when it works like that, it's great. It's like a total flow experience.
And it really feels like you're just hearing the character and you're taking
Yes,
dictation.
yeah, on a good day.
The story does revolve around the finance world. We know by the title, particularly events leading up to Lehman Brothers collapse. But a lot of the action takes place outside the office. And we do have this central theme around greed and power, but there's also a lot about family relationships and fathers and sons and brothers. Can you talk a little about that, the family relationships that you've included here?
Yes. You know, I think part of the challenge in writing about despicable characters is making them relatable enough so
Hmm.
that the reader cares what happens to them.
Hmm.
And so Jed has a family life, which is revealed to the reader. And you see some positive aspects of Jed. You see him falling in love as a teenager in a Chinese restaurant. You see him relating to his granddaughter. You, I don't know. I'm running out of positive characteristics, but but there are others with even worse problems. So I don't. Again, I mean, I'm doing my best to answer your question, but I'm not sure I'm getting there.
Well, I think it's interesting, and you make a really valid point about a way to create empathy with a character is to understand their background, understand why they are the way that they are, maybe, right? And a great way to kind of show that is
Is
their
through their family,
through their family. Yeah.
right? So Jed's father is, is a laughably uh, bumbling entrepreneur. He has all these crazy schemes about how he's going to make money. One was a burial at sea. where he uses his sons to help him effect these schemes.
Mm.
Another was an oxygen bar. A third one, which he considered and discarded, was renting puppies to people for the summer and then taking them back in the winter. And then I don't know, he's got all kinds of schemes. And one of them, Jed himself, is the point person on because he has to go around with Jiffy fire extinguishers and knock on people's doors to try to sell them fire extinguishers.
Mhm.
Um, which I don't like to talk about what's real in there for me and so forth, but I did do that. I did as a 10-year-old knock on people's doors. They were surprised that they had to look down to see someone that short at their door. And then they all smoked, so they would let me light a fire in their ashtrays, and then I'd put it out with my Jiffy fire extinguisher. And I dare say my success rate was 100%. I don't think anyone ever let me in the door without buying a fire extinguisher. So when I got to Wall Street, it was a lot tougher than that. And before I worked my way up to vice chairman, I had plenty of hurdles to get over, which were a lot more difficult than selling fire extinguishers.
But that was where it started. That's when you knew
Yes.
you were good.
Yep.
And in
That was
this,
my first job.
and in the novel, really, I'm just thinking as you're talking, that's really how Jed earned love from his father, really, in a way, right? Was
Yes.
performing, like increasing the bottom line, if you will. Uh,
Hmm.
and so we sort of empathize with that as we see where that's kind of coming from as he's working his way up through Wall Street and trying to grab all those Lehman shares that he can.
Well, this is not suspense. It's not a thriller.
Mm,
Yeah, I think of it as literary fiction.
yeah,
So I'm not too worried about giving away the plot when I say, because the mystery is who is who is this guy,
yeah.
and you don't really get a final word on that till the last word in the book. But the secret successful entrepreneur in his family is the mother, who's
Mhm.
running a clandestine business on the side with the owner of the chap who gave him his first job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I loved that chapter. I love that part. Another thing about Jed, though, um, is that he suffers with depression. And
Yes.
we see that suffering throughout many times in many different ways throughout the book. Very much so from his wife's point of view. Um, why did you find it important to explore that aspect of his life and character?
Hmm. Well, life has its ups and downs. They're more severe for some people than others.
Hmm.
I don't think they had SSRIs or whatever they're called in
Mhm.
those days.
Mhm.
And a lot of people used a lot of inventive techniques, shall we say, in
Yeah.
Jed's case, to cope with the depression. In Jed's case, it was easy to set him off. The slightest insult or suggestion that he wasn't as perfect as he liked to project
Hmm.
would set him off. He was highly numerate and good with numbers, and he had decent people skills. But I wouldn't say the book is an exploration of bipolarity or manic depression or whatever. It's just here's a guy with these symptoms, and here's how the people around him have to deal with them and how he deals with them.
Hmm.
And in that sense, I hope it's interesting, but it's far from uh, it's not the interiority of Jed is described in passing. It's not, I mean, like if you read Anita Brookner, for example, a wonderful British author who wrote a book called Look at Me before Jennifer Egan came out with one having the same title. You just, you're in the mind of a British spinster,
Hmm.
and it goes into great depth as to what she's thinking about everything. In Jed's case, he's a man of action, and it's more about what he's doing
Hmm.
than what he's thinking, wouldn't you say?
Yes, I think so. But I felt like, especially, as I said, especially in his wife's story, it felt like his bouts with depression were a huge part of that piece of the story, and maybe a huge, we see more of the effect on her, I guess, getting her interiority in that story
Right.
than really getting it from Jed.
Is she telling that in I think she's telling it in the first person, isn't she? Uh, let's
I
see.
can't remember if she was in the first person.
But in any event, yes, when they first start dating, he admits right up front that he has these
Hmm.
occasional mood problems,
Hmm.
but she doesn't find out until they're married and living in New York City, a venue she would not have chosen. Yes, it is in the first person. She
Hmm.
wouldn't have chosen it if it were up to her. She's there because of Jed, and part of her job, she soon realized, is managing these bouts of depression. And she gets pretty good at it, but sometimes she just wants to throw him out of the house and call it quits. So, you get inside her mind more than you get inside his. But you see their relationship. The first chapter ends with a kind of truce at a fancy French restaurant in Paris,
Hmm.
and you get the story of how she was thrown out of her house by her own father because of a young love affair that she had. So she's got family issues too. I would say they're quite different people, Jed and Amanda, but they seem to have a modus vivendi that works for them.
Yeah. This is your debut novel. You're now in your 80s. You're still enjoying a highly successful career in finance. What drew you to writing a novel?
Well, uh, you know, a lot of people made money on Wall Street, and a lot of them made a lot more money than I did. Hold on, I get rid of that. Look what it's reminding me of. Um, but I don't know anyone from the street who wrote a novel, and I've always wanted to write a novel. From the time I was a kid, I thought, wouldn't it be great to tell a story that everybody liked to read? Well, of course, that's an impossibility as you learn as you get older, but at least a story that people read. And, when I first started this journey, I hoped to publish anonymously. I didn't want to disrupt my life by getting out there and saying who I was. I was just like, read the damn book, you know? Uh, and but I I don't have a big job right now, and I haven't been a Wall Street monster for years. If I was vice chairman at Credit Suisse now, I probably wouldn't have had to do as much in the way of getting out there. But I'm
Hmm.
talking about myself a lot more than I would like to, and yet it's part of the process of publishing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to publish a novel, and now here I am. And I am old. I mean, she's 82 years old. I'll be 83 in December. So that's plenty old to be coming out with your first novel. But I got I got two more on deck. So let's see if I can do it again.
I love it. You've said that one thing that keeps you going is curiosity.
Hmm,
Can you talk
that's
about that?
true. Oh, I'm curious about so many things. I uh, I I do talk to the AI programs a lot about this and that. Sometimes it's just facts.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's about how they work, how their minds work. and
Mm.
the how they handle human emotions. I've had some fascinating conversations there. I'm curious about China and Chinese culture. I've been studying that since I was a kid. I speak some Chinese. I've learned French. I'm studying Spanish. I'm always busy trying to learn things, and there's almost no human being you can run into that doesn't have some fascinating, interesting aspect.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about people. And I would much rather learn the answer to a question from a person or a really smart AI program than I would go to the library and spend weeks myself researching it. So I can keep probing on the aspects of something that I'm interested in without getting a PhD in it.
Well, you already have several degrees, so
Yeah, thank you. I think enough is enough.
have you always been a writer?
Hmm. Well, I say always. I was just talking to Libis, my wife, about a woman who first interested me in writing. Her name was Miss Annan, and she was my high school English teacher.
Mm.
Uh, we should have called her Dr. Annan because she was probably one of two or three PhDs in the Chicago public school system. But she was rough. I mean, she there were no jokes. It was all about, the right word, the right structure. She's the one who taught me how to write a sentence and what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And it went from there. And so once I got to be a very big wheel on Wall Street, they decided that I needed to be more of a spokesperson for the firm. And they hired somebody to teach me how to relate to the press, and they would place articles for me. So I began placing articles about finance. And then I realized, well, people, if you're an expert in one field, people will give you the benefit of the doubt in another. So I began writing about China and foreign affairs and pretty much anything I wanted to write about. And so I have I have a whole bunch of nonfiction articles to my credit or discredit, depending on your point of view. But they all got published in various respectable or publications. But all along, I was secretly writing fiction, little stories about this and that. Even when I didn't have time, I would be interested in the traits and beliefs
Mm.
of the people around me.
You were writing even when you didn't have time. Is that what
Yes.
I love
Hmm.
that. What was the road to publication like for you?
Oh, horrible. Absolutely horrible. I mean, I might have started, I think I tell this story in um, maybe a interview I did with Ulster magazine. But basically, I wrote a novel called Winner Take All, and I showed it to a friend who was kind of a god in the literary world, and she told me uh, it sucked. And I came to embrace her point of view. I thought she was right, so I put it in a drawer, and then I confined myself to snippets and short stories. Uh, And I have like you discovered one I've got fragments and writings from the time I was in high school. There was a period where I had wrote a journal. Uh, I don't know what makes people write, but I've been writing since someone gave me a pen. I learned to read on comic books, uh, and I was just trying to sell my grandchildren on a book called Mr. Popper's Penguin, but I couldn't make the sale. But all these kids' books, were of great interest to me, and I love to show off to my parents about how facile I was with my reading.
And then after the the novel that you were told sucked, How did you then go on to get high finance in our hands
Oh, yeah,
as
yeah, yeah.
the
So
as
the
the
public,
eager reading public?
the eager reading public. Well, first I sent it to a couple of agents. I was told, well, you find out what uh, book they published, and then say that yours is very much like that one, and would they please take a look at it?
Hmm.
And I got some wonderful rejection letters, always starting out heaping praise on me, and then some, passing reason why it wasn't for them. And then, so at that point, I had finished High Finance. I put it in a drawer and turned to the next novel, the one I was just talking about, which the working title is The Maggie Chronicles. And I turned to that, and that took like 5 years. So then I joined the board of PEN America, which is the writer's free speech, freedom of expression. And there was a man on that board who was very helpful to me. Uh, he he had discovered many great writers and was good enough to read my work and say nice things about it. First time he did, I said, "Is that the beginning of a rejection letter?"
That's because you've
But
gotten good rejections.
I had gotten very good rejections. And then he sent it to a couple of high-powered agents, and they all heaped praise on it and said, "But it's not in our wheelhouse." So there came a day, and he had already told me that the chances of getting a publishing house to say yes, if you don't come through an agent, are very close to zero.
Hmm.
But it turns out he knew a publishing house, and he's the one who introduced me to Ulysses. And Ulysses was just about to make a push into fiction. So it was basically just good luck. And so I said, okay, I'll go ahead and publish the Maggie Chronicles. And he said, no, I think you should publish High Finance because it's closer to who you are professionally, and it should be an easier sell. So I'm doing that. I'm hoping I don't have to edit the Maggie Chronicles too much, and that's how it happened.
That's great. I love that. And going out and just making the necessary connections, keeping on with it. And
Well,
then,
I should say though, in terms of perseverance, I guess I left off an important dimension, which is I got to the point with the Maggie Chronicles uh, where I just said, the hell with it. I'm going to publish this myself. I have a great uh, person I work with, Shannon Nacy, who's my chief operating officer, and I figured between us, we'd figure it out. I had helped Sumner Redstone acquire Viacom, and I'd served on the Viacom board for many years, 17 years actually. And during that time, we owned Simon and Schuster. So I knew something about publishing and I know finance. So I figured I could learn the unit economics. So I studied all this stuff and learned, you can get Ingram to publish the physical copies and Amazon will put the electronic connection up there for you. And I was barreling down a path to self-publishing when I met Ulysses and they convinced me that I didn't know what the hell I was talking about or doing, and that they would take care of it. And so off we went.
you have said that publishing is performance art. Can you talk about what you mean by that?
Well, yes, I should just say on the last story though, that I the fact that I was willing to self-publish gave me some negotiating leverage that I wouldn't otherwise have had because there was commonality of interest, but that made me feel stronger than I had. It turns out that it was a shimmer. I wouldn't have done it well myself. Anyway, uh, what's the question we're turning to now? I got
Publishing your assertion in another interview that publishing is
oh, it's performance art,
performance art.
right? Uh, well, once I figured out that I couldn't publish anonymously, then the question is, how much do you want to say about yourself? And the answer is,
Hmm.
you may not have the choice. I mean, you get out there. uh, and I figured out early on that publishing a debut novel at age 82 was probably one of the best things I had going for me because it's very man bites doggy, isn't it?
Mhm.
So it's what journalists like. And so
Mhm.
I found that I had to, I just had a really nice party in DC after a talk at Politics and Prose bookstore, and I'll probably have one in New York. And I've been writing these articles. I did a piece with Alan Alda for People magazine where we talk about curiosity and being creative at an old age. So yeah, you write articles, you answer interview questions, and you tell stories about the book, and that's performance art.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, when you get up there and improv, I mean, I didn't know what you were going to ask me today. I suppose this is sort of a performance art on your part as well as mine, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Just going for it.
Okay.
What is your uh, best advice for aspiring authors?
Well, do they want to be published or can they
Yes.
just be an author? You
Do
know,
they want to be published?
yeah, start young. Don't do what I did. Uh, but I would say hanging out with other artists,
Mm.
showing your work, getting comments, making sure that it's been exposed to somebody who knows good writing, maybe even an editor or two. And then when you finally have a piece that you're happy with, that you'd say to yourself, okay, I wouldn't mind if anybody read that. I'd be proud enough. Then you better find an agent and you better have a good year and a half or 2 years for the process of getting published because
Mm.
it'll probably take you 6 to 9 months to find the agent. It'll probably take the agent 3 to 6 months to find the right person at the right publishing house. And the industry is in turmoil right now. So that's could be even more. And then, if it's one of the big five, I would say uh, you can count on maybe a 9 month to 1 year wait before you get the
Mm.
pub date. And the pub date, uh, well, then you wait, and you've given away a lot of power to the publishing house. But at least you're going to be published. Um, After that, I don't know what advice to give. I would say if you want to make a lot of money, don't be a writer because the odds are very, very bad that you'll publish a hit of some kind. So you've got to love the process of writing, and you've got to. I have to say that so far, the pub date for my novel was uh, September 2nd, and so far, I mean, it's only like a couple, 3 weeks. It's been total fun. I don't mind yakking about the book or about life or finance or whatever you want to talk about. So yeah, it's been a gas. So do it if you would love to write, and if you've got the patience to uh, wait a year or two after you're done before you see your book as a physical object.
We have a traditional last question on the podcast, and it is when high finance is made into a movie or series, what do you think the theme song should be?
Ha! Uh, how about something like money, money, money? It's so funny in a rich man's world.
I love it. It's perfect. It's perfect. Ken Miller, thank you so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure getting the chance to talk with you.
Likewise, Kelly.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.